Hello, welcome back to Search with Sean. This is another Chat with Sean episode, and we have somebody's been on the show recently, but we've got more one-to-one sessions. So I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, he was involved with Real Talk with Sean recent episode, so I'll put a link to that in the description so you can go and check it out. It's actually a really good discussion that we had, a great conversation. But I'll do the intro anyway, just in case you didn't see that one. But yeah, today we're joined by Christian Goodrich, who is currently the head of search marketing and AI search at SOZO. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us again, Christian.
That's
Really
all right,
looking
Sean.
forward to this.
Yeah, cheers for having me back again.
Yeah, obviously we've got a whole host of topics as usual to get through, and I'm really looking forward to it because, like you say, you were on the Real Talk with Sean episode, and you have so many great insights and knowledge that's why I wanted to get you on, just to have this one-on-one discussion. And so I guess that everyone's making their predictions, and no one knows. I don't even think they're sat in Google and OpenAI. They really know what's going 100%. But what kind of are the biggest shifts you predict for SEO and AI search in the rest of this year? You know, particularly OpenAI are pushing towards like monetization. They said they're going to bring in impression-based adverts and stuff. And obviously Google rolling out all sorts of stuff with agentic AI and all those sorts of things, the Chrome stuff that they're doing. Yeah, what's your hot takes on all that?
Yeah, gosh. I mean, I think 2026 is going to be a big year for the search industry. I mean, 2025, like the amount that went down, and even just attending Brighton SEO, like when you go to the likes of Brighton SEO in April, and then if you go again in October, even just the amount of change and evolution that you can see just within that short window of time. The search industry changes a lot year on year, but it felt like 2025 was a particularly big one. And I think we're set up again for another big one in 2026. You mentioned, Sean, about like ChatGPT, and just within the last couple of weeks with, advertising, brands can, start on a sort of trial basis, start advertising on ChatGPT. A lot of press releases still coming out on that front. So it'd be really interesting to see what brands race to take that up. It sounds like it's going to be a cost per impression rather than a cost per click model. So it will be really interesting, I think, to start seeing some case studies coming through where brands are experimenting with that along the likes of Google ads, LinkedIn advertising, kind of weighing up like what's the return, what's the cost per lead acquisition, and then how do you measure that? It'll be really interesting. And I think it's a fascinating point in OpenAI's journey where, they're having to clearly, I think, escalate their own monetization beyond their sort of partnerships that they've got going on. I think it's a really big year for OpenAI. I think with their they're obviously hot on the heels with Google and with Gemini. I think it's going to be a really big year. I think we're going to start to see more and more patterns as to whether sort of Gemini is winning over ChatGPT, whether there's room for both. But I think it's a healthy battle between the two. I think it works out really well for users and really well for our industry. I don't think it's healthy for Google to have the monopoly. And I think certainly the arrival of OpenAI and ChatGPT has helped sort of Google step it up in terms of like their transparency, step it up in terms of their product offering, Nano Banana, and lots that they're doing with Gemini. So yeah, it's going to be a big year ahead. But I think my prediction, I think by the end of this year, we'll have a much clearer picture as to, the future of OpenAI and its battle against Google, or whether there is room for both to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously no one knows. I mean, you can only look at the current data where the uptake of Gemini has been like really strong recently, and the uptake of ChatGPT was obviously huge. Then it stabilized, and now I think Rand Fishkin put out a post in the last few days saying it saw actually a slight decline in uptake. So I don't know. I actually love ChatGPT. I use it a lot, but I can't see it winning. The more I look at it, their business, their financial current status, the way Sam Altman, their leader as such, the way he conducts himself, I can't see them winning this. Google with their data, with their power, with their monopolized state of the market. I can't see how OpenAI, even as a just surviving. I don't know how they survive, because you've seen obviously the data about their financial status. It looks like they're going to run out of money if they don't start bringing it in. And obviously, like, not many, I don't know how many people will take up that impression-based advertising opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say about a year ago to 2 years ago, and again, like when attending Brighton SEO, there was a lot of noise around, the rise of ChatGPT, and there was lots of stats being thrown around, like by 2020, 30, ChatGPT could exceed searches on Google, and lots of kind of big statements about OpenAI taking over and everyone jumping ship. And I always said from the get-go that, like, Google, with all of their dominance in the market, their investment behind them, and their legacy and what they've done up to this point, Google are not going to stand still. And I think that's really important for people in our industry and for brands to take on board that, if Google just said, we're going to stay as a traditional search engine, we're going to show you 10 blue links and kind of hope for the best and hope that people don't embrace LLMs, then sure. I think as search evolves and as people's adoption of AI evolves, then that could well be the case. But I've always said, like, Google's not gonna just take the punches and stand still. And we've seen a significant amount of evolution on Google's part. And I've seen, even within our own team, like, people coming and going as to whether they prefer ChatGPT or Gemini, and even within our departments at SOZO, like, you might have the devs preferring to use Claude. You might have some in our marketing team going, we absolutely love some of the image generation features that have been released through Nano Banana and Gemini Pro. Dynamic View is a recent feature in Gemini as well, which could transform the way that we report back data to key stakeholders. And there's lots of really cool features coming out from Google that, for me, says that, Google is powering forward to kind of lead and catch up in a lot of features. I'm kind of with you, Sean. I do still lean towards ChatGPT personally, partly because a lot of my own ecosystem and projects and history is kind of within ChatGPT, that it would be like a big slog to have to migrate everything to Gemini. And certainly as an agency and working across multiple individuals and teams, I do feel that, like, right now there's better team infrastructure and share and collaboration capabilities in ChatGPT that I still feel like Gemini is catching up on. I believe at the time of this recording, like, Gemini still doesn't have, like, the facility for, like, projects and for sharing of projects and a team framework. So I still think there's a lot for, like, teams, agencies, and brands. I don't think it just comes down to the quality of the response in an LLM. I think it's also about the different features and how it works best for teams. So, but a lot could change in 2 weeks. There could be a really big release from Gemini that completely changes my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the image generation and the video is unreal, like, on Google, to be fair. I was going to say about it, obviously we always talk about Google, ChatGPT, OpenAI, but obviously there are others in the market, like you say, Claude and Perplexity and Copilot and stuff like this. I think, like, with Copilot, it's got a lot better, but it still lacks, again, like, that sort of, especially, like, obviously there are things built into Teams and stuff like that, which is really good. But I still feel like when you're creating projects, it's still lacking some stuff that ChatGPT has. But do you feel like all those others are actually going to survive? And two, do you feel like, could any of them emerge as, like, any form of competitor?
I can completely see some buyouts, acquisitions happening at some point over the next year or 2 years. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, just like within the last few months, we saw Adobe acquiring SEMrush. and all of the impact and noise that's created since. It wouldn't surprise me at all in the LLM space if we saw some of those other kind of smaller market share players eventually get acquired or bought out by, either Google or Open AI, and bringing all of that kind of market share in and some of those feature capabilities. Don't know a great deal about the financial stability of some of those other LLMs. As I said, I'm quite sort of biased to ChatGPT for my own workflow, but it could well come down to, Gemini versus ChatGPT in the long term. But I'm sure some of our dev department might disagree on that. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it unfolds. But I do think Google is very clever with some of the features that they're rolling out, because I think Google have identified that our industry are kind of like the evangelists for which LLM to choose within the search industry. Like, our adoption of these kind of tools and features, like we're pretty hot on it as an industry, like easily compared to like wider public adoption. So I think who wins the wider public adoption, I think, is evangelized by, our industry. And I think that is in part why Google is being so proactive, releasing features like, with the image generation Nano Banana and the dynamic view feature, which is still within sort of a beta framework. All of these kind of cool features that make people in our industry take notice and reevaluate which LLM we use. And then I think that fuels then what we go and have conversations when our clients, when brands say to us, hey, you work within the search industry, which LLM should we use? We're then influenced by some of the features that Gemini and ChatGPT are rolling out and how it impacts our own workflow.
The same goes to Search Console. Obviously, like, it went from 0 to 100, the amount of updates they've done recently on Search Console alone. So I think, again, they're kind of like, giving us some support there and helping us sort of in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Search Console, I've always almost fallen back in love with Search Console over the past year or two with all of the new features. And for me, I'm a big fan of Looker Studio and bringing in like Search Console data and just presenting it in much more powerful ways beyond the default interface. But yeah, really pleasing to see some of these features. But again, maybe that just ties into Google. And again, that's why I say it's healthy. I don't think it's healthy for Google to have the monopoly like they've done for so many years. Microsoft have tried to kind of attack that with Bing, and that partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI is quite a powerful one. But I think it's really good because it does prompt Google, across its ecosystem to be a lot more proactive, and it means we get to see much more exciting features being rolled out in search. The only frustration is when you just get used to something and you feel like you've mastered a particular workflow or tech stack, and then Google release or OpenAI release this whole new feature, and it's like, dang, I've got to relearn this now or quickly become an expert in this.
Yeah. And I think what Google has an advantage of as well is, like, I'm just doing some work on, like, Reuters Institute. They've stated like 50% of people trust AI results these days. And obviously there's some other figures. So OpenAI, like ChatGPT, is seen as obviously just AI, like, but Google are a much more trusted brand, 80 odd % trust Google generally. So they're not, I think the general public, and obviously there's just like I don't know this for fact, but I'm going to guess that most people in Google, when they use it, they don't really fully understand how AI is intertwined with it, kind of weaved into the results and stuff. They still see it as a Google search with some like AI kind of into it. So the trust is still there with Google versus an AI, fully AI sort of model,
Yeah. I always find it because we can be in a bubble in the search industry. And for me, I find it fascinating when I'm in the company of like a friend or family member or one of my kids, and I observe like how they search. And like my kids the other day were, I tasked them with researching some holiday ideas for February half term, which they loved. And it was just fascinating seeing how they utilize search. And I could see my 12-year-old engaging with AI overviews and treating it as factual, and very much like oh, this is the cost. And I had to say to him, like, oh, just make sure you go actually onto the train website just to check that those train times and costs that have been presented there are actually accurate. I'm thinking like, wider public adoption don't always have the awareness that AI makes mistakes. I suppose that's, going to be particularly prevalent with like, legal, healthcare, etc. But I just think it would be fascinating to see how the wider public adoption of LLMs evolves. I've seen it a lot just over the past 12 months. I mean, every week I'm meeting with different brands. Big thing for me is asking a lot of the clients I work with, what's your adoption of AI? Which LLM are you using? Are you using a free version or a paid version? If I'm overseeing their search marketing, their SEO, their PPC, I want to know what they're using, because that influences the content on their website if they're using it for content production or somewhere in their workflow. And I've noticed a seismic shift over the last 12 months with the conversations with clients. Like 12 months ago, majority of clients, it was very much like, we've heard about it on BBC News. Oh, we're a bit afraid of AI. We're not sure about it. Whereas now pretty much every client I'm meeting with on a weekly basis is like, we are using AI. I would still say for a lot of like brands and wider public adoption, it's still in that like experimental phase. I think for us in the search industry, it's very much like embedded for the most part in our workflow and our day to day. But I think like clients, brands outside of our industry, there's still a degree of experimentation and lack of continuity and still figuring out the best way to use it.
Yeah. When I'm on the train, like I am seeing, obviously without looking too much at people's phones, but I do see like people actually on ChatGPT and talking to it, and like you say, having conversation with family members saying that, oh, I was asking ChatGPT this, and like WhatsApp has its own like AI on there now. People were using that, sort of asking questions and stuff. I think that's the thing. A lot of people are using AI without actually knowing they're using AI. Like they kind of know, but you know what I mean? Like they just kind of see it as just like another feature that's chucked into WhatsApp or something. They're not really clear that, like you say with your kids, like they just think that's part of the Google sort of experience. That's like another feature, which it is, but it is powered by AI, which like, those who don't really know about it, if you don't know, you don't know sort of thing.
Yeah. So I guess to round it off in terms of like predictions for this year, do you think not just in terms of that OpenAI versus Gemini and seeing more features rolled out, but I'm excited to see this year just how your typical average user, outside of our industry, it would be interesting to see just how the adoption of AI-driven search evolves over this next year. Is clearly from last year, I can see, even if I just isolate the conversations with my clients, with friends, with family, even if you're not driven by stats, I certainly get that feel that wider public adoption is slowly taking hold, and it will just be interesting to see how that becomes more prevalent as the year progresses.
And it obviously all depends on how aggressive Google, OpenAI go with their advertising around their products. And like ChatGPT have done quite a few adverts recently around just day-to-day things like planning a road trip, or even like planning a cancer treatment appointment and stuff like that. So it's interesting. Let's switch topics into like agentic commerce. It could obviously, like they've introduced stuff around shopping where it'll be like the entire research to actual purchase journey will be done directly on the search engine. How do you think, do you think that it will be adopted, and do you think they're going to roll it out further anytime soon? And also, do you feel like how should people be adapting their search strategies, if at all, at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating one, and it follows on to what I said about this, wider public adoption. And I do think more and more people are grasping LLMs as like an evolution of the way that they search and find information. The next thing is then how they apply that into their workflow. It might be to, draft the framework of a content piece. It might be to get a recipe or some advice, a second opinion. But I think the next big thing with agentic is that getting AI to actually do stuff for you and actually action things for you. And again, I think we're starting to really adopt that within our industry, within the search industry. So I kind of see that same pattern happening where, agentic has really kind of taken off over the last kind of 3 to 6 months. But even within our industry, I still feel it's like in a discovery phase. People are trying to understand what it is. We're having conversations about it, with OpenAI's Atlas browser, where you can have ChatGPT right next to your browser experience, and you can interact with ChatGPT and then have it start doing stuff and actually understanding what you're browsing right there in the window, rather than this kind of disconnect between LLM and browser experience. It would be really interesting to see how, not just within our industry, but outside of it, how agentic takes hold. Though it was fascinating last quarter, I believe it was around October time, ChatGPT launching the ability for Shopify merchants in the US to be able to connect to your store to ChatGPT so that people can buy from your store directly within ChatGPT. So when your product gets surfaced, the user's not then having to click or move across to Google Chrome or, outside of the LLM. They can completely buy that product that's been surfaced completely within ChatGPT. So I think that's a real powerful indicator of agentic and agentic commerce. And I think a lot of users will probably still feel quite nervous about, oh gosh, like doing a whole transaction and from research straight to checkout in an LLM, like outside of Google, outside of a website. Oh, this feels a little bit weird. But I think that's going to really evolve and change. I think we're going to see more within our industry of people using agentic to actually, for LLMs to actually do stuff for us, where we actually go, thanks for the research, now go and do. It's, big year. I still think there's so much change ahead of us.
Yeah. And I was talking to Natalia Witchig on here recently around how China goes about it, because in China, they've been using the very, like we're right, all kind of looking at doing stuff through one platform, for example, like Google. But in China, that's very normal. I think it's like WeChat, where literally everything they do is via this one app on their phone. They buy things, they browse things, they talk with people, they do literally everything from this one app in China. So, it's not like it's that new, but obviously we're used to having so many choices to go on different websites, and this site does this platform is good for this, and not having one place. I personally feel like it's just part of the evolutionary way that we do things. I think it will be a fact that in 6 months to a year, that'll just be normal, where we buy things directly through it. And I think it'll also expand to like leaving donations and signing up for events and that sort of thing. Because it is just a pain, really. If you're going through a site, going through all those steps, if you could just shortcut that, and like the reason you should be signing up for this event based on all your personalized information we have about you. We know this will be good for you. It's near you. This is how you get there. Blah, blah, blah. Sign up for it now. Click, done. Why wouldn't it? It's a much better user experience. I think the problem we've got as search marketeers is we're so with the old metrics that we've been kind of, reporting on. I think Will Reynolds did a piece on this. Is like, we're going to have to like totally transform what we deem success and how we track it and how we're seen in that sort of digital marketing space, moving away from like hardcore metrics to like visibility based sort of part of that messaging. It's going to be an interesting one. What do you think about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of getting AI to actually do stuff for us. I mean, even within my own workflow, I would still say it's like that's in like cautious experimentation. So I think, wider public is still in that really early phases. I mean, for me, I'm a big fan in terms of AI use. If it actually improves the output and improves the efficiency, then, I'll lean into that. I think for me, I'm very much an advocate of not like a non-negotiable for me is compromise on quality. So with agentic, if there are means to improve workflow or efficiency or speed of output through getting AI to actually do stuff for you, for me, like I'm open to that, but without compromise on the quality. Like if I've got to go back through and go through everything with a fine tooth comb or make loads of corrections where AI has not done it as I'd hoped, then I almost like don't necessarily, I end up putting that time back where I've initially saved it. So I think within the industry, it's going to be interesting to see how these tools kind of evolve, how people start to kind of build trust with LLMs, not just giving information and returning information, but actually like actioning tasks for us. Yeah, I think 2026 is going to be a key year. It would be interesting to start seeing if there'll be more features like what we've seen with ChatGPT, where people can just do the full user journey without having to leave the LLM. I think that's going to be a big thing with OpenAI and Google is how do they keep people within the ecosystem? I think Google's better placed for that. I think with OpenAI, I'm sorry, going off topic slightly, but with I think that's going to be the big challenge for OpenAI this year, particularly in the context of agentic, is how do they retain the user within their ecosystem and get rid of this behavior where the user does the research in ChatGPT and then jumps off and defaults back to Google or to traditional search.
Yeah. And, the thing is, like, I've been saying this to others, is like, although they need like adoption from the general public, if they want to push the narrative in any way because of the power they have, they will do it. If they wanted, if you got the money to pay for ads and to force people to use your browser, for example, like if you sign a deal with Apple and suddenly your browser's, Google Chrome or whatever, it's kind of like you're pushing it onto people anyway, so they're kind of forced into that. And I just think like we've said this, I mean, humans are lazy. Like, we just have to put out, they are late. If they're given a shortcut to do something, they will most probably take that shortcut and take it up. But I do have problems. There are still flaws in it. Like I did a look for a local holiday using the ChatGPT shopping feature they have on there. And I wasn't that impressed with it. There was like you say, the pricing was a bit off when I actually went onto the site and did the checks myself. So yeah, there's still flaws in it. I just feel like even if there are flaws and they want to push it onto people, then they will do that. Like they've really fast tracked it all. So like I don't think people expected that agentic stuff to be implemented already at this stage in 2026. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
I mean, I think the logic, the thinking, the capability of LLMs, it is evolving. It is getting better. I think with ChatGPT now, I think we're on latest 5 point. And I've noticed just, using it in my daily workflow, like the quality of the output, the amount that I'm having to correct it is certainly improved. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a fresh audit of my ChatGPT account at top level and, in the personalization settings where you can kind of change the nature of the response. So I've configured my defaults to be more of a challenging reasoning. So, ChatGPT's default of just being super optimistic about everything and not challenging me and just accepting everything I said to it was really bothering me. So I actually want, like in my top level settings, I now invite ChatGPT to challenge me. If you think there's an issue with what I'm saying, basically be devil's advocate. So I think to a degree, like the quality of output, when you hear in the industry that, oh, LLMs, the quality of output has been poor or there was a mistake. Sometimes, yes, that's the LLM's fault, but sometimes it comes down to the user. So I think LLMs have a challenge of how do they just generally uplift and mitigate that for your average user. But I think to a degree, and I think this is something that, again, will evolve, not just with LLM features, but the way that people use it. I'm sure there's a big proportion of people out there that are using LLMs daily, but don't realize that they've got personalization settings at top level and the ability to add instructions and say, hey, ChatGPT, I want everything in, I'm British, I'm writing for a British audience. I want everything to be written in British spelling and grammar unless I say otherwise. I question how many people are actually baking that in to get the best output from LLMs. But I think that's something that we will see more and more over time. People will become a lot more savvy and used to using LLMs and getting the most out of them.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that with like the internet generally and then social media. And I think the problem is, it's like, there's many problems, but obviously that echo chamber kind of thing where people are just being served the stuff that agrees with them, and LLMs are just agreeing with everything they say without them knowing like they can do the stuff you were saying it.
I was just going to say, Sean, like remembering back to the early days of the web, and even just seeing when people you'd say, oh, what's the website? And everyone would be, it's www. And for a long time, people felt that they had to say like www. And they always had to put that when they searched in the browser. And you'd be laughed at nowadays if someone said, oh yeah, what's their website? And you said www. But such is the way that people's behavior has evolved. And I think it's the same with LLMs and use of AI. I think by the end of this year, certainly within our industry, we'll be in a very different place. And it will just be fascinating to see how it takes hold. I think I said about it in the last call, because I have a monthly video call with my family who are like various places afar. And I think the day I'm on a family call with my dad and he says to me, oh, Christian, I've been using that ChatGPT, rather than ChatGPT. But the day that my dad says, hey son, I'm using ChatGPT, I will literally fall off my chair. That for me is one of the key indicators as to when it's really taken wider public hold.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I was going to say, like, the problem is like with large language models and stuff, they are programmed pretty much to always give some form of answer and to complete the task. And that is their downfall, because especially when it comes to my neck of the woods in terms of medical information, there is sometimes where maybe or don't know is probably the best answer. And that is kind of like, so I feel like across the board, they maybe need to be like programmed in that way a bit better, but maybe it's too late. I don't know. In the sense of like websites, because I'm sure you're going to get a lot of this from clients and stuff, like saying that our website traffic is bombed. What is the point of SEO? What is the point of optimizing our website if we're not getting any traffic, if it's declined 25% in the last year? How do you combat that? And how do you still see websites playing a pivotal role in search going forward?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it's been one of the big challenges over the last 12 months in particular, conversations with clients, with brands around website traffic. And we can still, within our industry, have those challenges on a regular basis where a client's saying, you say that my rankings are really good, but yet I'm seeing, like minus 30% year on year decline in my clicks, according to Google Search Console. What's happening? What are you doing? So it's been a really challenging year, I think, helping clients navigate and understand sort of the impact of people's movement to LLMs. Surfacing of AI overviews is now showing for 55 to 60% of searches. And we've seen for a number of our clients where they're really proactive with blog articles and informational content. When you look at it year on year, they'll still be, say, position 1, but the amount of clicks that they're getting is significantly down versus previous year. We've had scenarios where the amount of impressions in Search Console is up, but the clicks are significantly down. And in some cases, that's AI overviews, like stealing the clicks. People get the answer that they want right there in Google. So you get the brand awareness, but not the click. We've seen big changes with Google over the past year. In October, there was a big change in the way that Google presents ads. It's now like even more subtle. So, that kind of attacks organic click-through rate potential. So again, we've seen sort of impact of PPC stealing real estate and click-through rate from organic. So that sort of compounds a lot of the questions from brands, from clients around seeing less clicks. I think it'd be really difficult if a brand measures success heavily or purely on website clicks, then I don't think that's a very healthy place to be. I think brands that succeed will embrace and acknowledge that there are legitimate reasons for why they might be seeing less website traffic. I think they have to realign their expectations and measure. I don't think you should just ignore clicks. I think it's still a useful signal. I think when you see a decline in clicks, you should always cross-reference that with your search visibility. Like, is it legitimately because we've seen a decline in rankings? That could still be the case. But I think there's other factors. There's lots of different factors at play. So I think brands will embrace that. They will acknowledge the things that they can't control and that their competitors are also seeing, like AI overviews impacts everyone. If a particular brand is struggling for less clicks from AI overviews, that could well be their competitor in the same boat. But I think the brands that succeed are the ones that will acknowledge that wider industry global change and seek to move forward. Well, okay, we can't change AI overview output, but how do we get our brand more prominently showing in that space? How can we still leverage the brand awareness, even if we don't get the click?
Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, like if you didn't think that kind of thing was important, then why would you be still investing in things like billboards and things like that that are very hard to track in terms of how much they monetize the company, but that they do a certain job in terms of bringing in visibility to the people you want to see it. So, with search going forward, like that's still going to be vital. People are going to search is still huge. People are searching more than ever. It's just the way the information's being, shown to them is changing in the way it's being displayed. So it doesn't mean like people aren't clicking through to the site that your brand still needs to be there for those queries or questions for sure. And so do you feel like the importance of the website is still there, and how are you kind of selling that to your clients in terms of why it's important?
Yeah, for me, the website is still very much a key asset. It's still something that brands should be investing heavily in. Obviously, from my position as a head of SEO and AI search, for me, it's seeing the website as this central resource that you have control over as a brand. It is a key point of influence in determining what AI understands about you. And going back to what we said about agentic, if wider public adoption continues to escalate, if people do start spending more time within LLMs, not just for initial research, but for the full user journey, it becomes more and more important how AI understands and surfaces your brand. And AI, as we know, doesn't just look at your website in isolation. It looks at multiple external citations, what people are saying about your brand on Reddit, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, to kind of build a picture about your brand, right? So, but often, like when we measure the clients we work with, when we measure their visibility in AI search, often the website can play quite a heavy influence on that. It might be like sort of 40 to 50% is influenced by sort of their own website citations. And then the other like 60-40% is influenced by external citations or things that it's picked up about the brand elsewhere. So, that is quite a big chunk of a brand's influence in AI search. So there is a risk that if a brand, invested less in their website, then that can have a negative impact on how their brand is surfaced and interpreted in AI search. What I do think will change is, like, I would predict that over the next year, like when brands come to SOZO and they say, hey guys, we want you to build a new website for us, I'm expecting to see an increasing amount of clients and brands where in that initial inquiry and then through to the briefing stage, I predict that there will be more brands saying, can we have it AI search friendly? And when you build the website for us, can we make sure that, AI search can like surface the content well and understand it? So I think there's a degree of overlap there with things that we already do with SEO, but I think brands will be placing increasing importance on making sure that their website is built to be AI search friendly and geared up for agentic.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think in some form, the value of a website's increased because, like you say, it's that centralized place where they're going to gather the information about who you are, what you do, why you do it. But so that's very much important for information retrieval. But then again, they're looking at all those other points because they can't trust a website fully, because you could say whatever you want on your website. You're going to say you're good. You're going to say you're the best at blah, blah, blah. So they don't want to believe that. They want backed up proof from other sources that they trust. So in a way, it's kind of declined a little bit in how much they trust a website as well. So I think obviously the onus is on you, and you do need to control the narrative, as I had recently discussion with Jason Barnard about. But again, like, you need to look at those third-party places and see what you can do to influence that as well. Are you seeing like much demand for that from clients yet, or is that something you're looking at more anyway from like different platforms?
So we've been delivering on a AI search service over the past 6 months. Been working with around 10 brands, like clients that we work with, and it sort of ties closely in with our SEO service. It kind of effectively works like a bolt-on. And there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn about, to deliver AIO or GEO, whatever you want to call it, you just do good SEO. And I think first of all, I think it's really important what you define as SEO and what you define as GEO. For us, like, a big thing is not just it being about visibility and rankings and positioning, but for me, with working with brands on AI search and AI search optimization, it should be so much more than that. It should be looking at brand sentiment and measurement of what AI understands about your brand. So, rather than just saying, well, if you're ranking well in Google, you're probably ranking all right in ChatGPT and Gemini, and we'll just keep cracking on. I'm not a big fan of that, and people can disagree with me on that. Happy for them to. We've found that actually extending measurement of brands outside of traditional SEO, outside of the Google ecosystem, has really unlocked like really productive conversations with brands that goes beyond rankings and visibility. We've had lots of really useful workshops with our clients talking about their brand sentiment. So it's, thinking about, well, what does AI understand about your brand? How does it communicate your brand? We've had instances where we've looked at, we've effectively stress tested like a number of prompts across like ChatGPT and Gemini for the brands we work with to determine like what's the brand sentiment. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is there any issues? And where is that being informed by? And it's brought about like really fascinating discussions with key stakeholders, with marketing teams around like, oh gosh, okay, we're getting some negative sentiment from our Trustpilot. Okay, how can we be more proactive with our Trustpilot reviews? How can we be more proactive and more thoughtful and more extensive in the way that we proactively respond to any negative feedback to help shape our conversion rate, but also what AI understands about our brand. There's so much that you can leverage and do with measuring your brand outside of just traditional search that just goes beyond like keywords and rankings, but still has a really positive impact on bottom line and a positive impact on conversion rate and your brand sentiment. So I don't know if that answers your question, Sean. That was quite long-winded, but it gives you a flavor of like how we've been sort of working with on AI search optimization.
No, it's really good. And I think it's Patrick Stocks on Hrefs. You said like, literally the one way you will definitely win is if you just have a good business, a good service and a good product. That's going to go a long way to helping you dominate, because you're going to get naturally good reviews, good feedback, and listed in different articles and being featured here and there just naturally because you're doing good stuff. But in terms of like the different platforms that you're looking at, obviously you've mentioned like Trustpilot, I'm sure Reddit is in there. What kind of platforms have come up as well that's been kind of influencing these results that you've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, a big obvious one is YouTube. We had a scenario, so we launched a Shopify site for a client back in Q4 of last year, and a big part of that brief was to maintain their already established traditional search rankings, but they've seen kind of less clicks versus previous year because of AI overviews, PPC, and all those kind of different factors. And we successfully maintained their rankings post-launch. A lot of work and effort went into the technical side as well as strengthening up the content. And we're also been measuring their visibility across AI search. And one of the things that really stood out to me at like a sore thumb when they came on board with us and they said it's really important that we maintain our traditional search rankings, especially versus like traffic from previous year. And we were having discussions around AI overviews, and that AI overviews is triggering for a lot of their like informational and commercial intent keywords. And I said to him, like, guys, you're really well established in traditional search, and absolutely we need to like work to maintain that for you. But I can't help but notice that your AI overview presence is terrible. And what we actually found in the data was that our client was ranking quite prominently in traditional search, but a lot of where their search rankings was triggering an AI overview, they weren't showing because a lot of the citations were from YouTube or external sources or like press releases. And it's really interesting because that particular client was not very proactive on YouTube. They're investing quite a lot of effort into like FAQs and content on their website, but they weren't investing in videos. So that's been like a big part of how we work with them and the strategy we're working on with them for 2026. And it was basically like, guys, we need you to be more proactive. So we've been like sharing with them examples of some of our other clients who are really proactive on YouTube. So for them, there's an exercise there, not just for the sake of like, YouTube's the second largest search engine to Google. And, there's a whole area of visibility there, but also like we're now thinking about what is its impact on AI-driven search. How can you better leverage the likes of YouTube and other external citations? LinkedIn is another one to positively influence your brand's visibility and sentiment. But that for me was a big standout. Certain websites that will have more of an impact, obviously e-commerce, Trustpilot's a big one that can have a heavy impact on brand sentiment. Reddit as well is of course huge. And again, just the organic nature of Reddit, brands being more aware about what people are speaking about their brand on Reddit, I think is really important moving into this year.
Yeah. And I guess it'll depend on what industry you're in, because, if you're in events, like the big event platforms are going to be more influential in those decisions and so on. I was looking because I pulled out some information earlier about Hrefs, Ryan Law from Hrefs saying about YouTube mentions are the single strongest predictor of AI visibility, stronger than the main rating, backlinks, or any traditional SEO factor. So yeah, basically it's like, it's a big one, YouTube.
Yeah. And we typically work with SMEs, and sometimes you're working with a startup or you're working with an e-com brand that behind the scenes might have quite a small resource and quite small marketing team. And because YouTube, videos can typically take longer to get right and do them well. We've worked with brands before that, could do a lot more and be a lot more proactive on YouTube. So I think brands really need to embrace YouTube and external factors around their brand, not just for the visibility and exposure, but for building trust, expertise, but the impact that has on AI search. One of our other brands that we work with is really proactive and has been for a number of years with their YouTube channel. And they sent out a survey to a lot of their existing customers. And they basically said to them, apart from price, why did you choose us? And they're competing with like for like SKUs against, big household name brands. So they basically said, like, why did you choose us beside price? And the key driving response that came back was because we saw your established YouTube channel, and that made us feel that you are trustworthy and legitimate and not just some randomer next to a household brand. So I think brands this year, if they're not already leveraging the likes of YouTube, LinkedIn, external outside of their website, now's the time for them to get on board, not just for that visibility, but for how it impacts what AI search understands about your brand.
Yeah. Something we touched upon in our Real Talk with Sean episode was like trust, and the trust in certain larger establishments and stuff is declining. Cost of living means we're questioning every decision we make, especially if it's a big purchase. We want to make sure it's the right one with the right person. So yeah, these sort of things are going to help with that,
And the great thing about YouTube for brands, and what you said, Sean, about trust, is it's really easy for a brand to hide behind a blog article and build a picture of themselves. But when a brand starts putting themselves in front of a video that really shows the people and the care and the expertise that sit behind that brand, like, that's much more difficult to fabricate compared to, say, a piece of blog content. So I think that's where there's a real opportunity for brands to build on their brand sentiment and their trust, which of course impacts bottom line, impacts conversion rate.
Yeah. I don't think blog is like totally dead, but I would say it is like, and it has been obviously forever, but definitely now quality over quantity. And, you're going to spend all that time. I would definitely, video would be one I'll put it on, because like I say, it can have so many more effects than just, the purpose of the actual video, but to actually all those other things we just talked about around EAT and stuff. We'll just move on to like the final two sort of topics. So obviously not just SEO having a tough time, but also our friends over in paid media also not having the best of times. There's obviously rising cost and all sorts of AI features being introduced and different ways they're bidding and stuff. So with that in mind, like a lot of people again looking at SEO and search, like how do you and with your clients demonstrate that sort of, impact of SEO versus paid? And I guess also, like, again, if you're not doing it already, like, I guess we would all love to do this a bit more, but it's really now very important to work alongside the paid teams and the social teams, so we have a unified message across all those different channels.
Yeah. So you mentioned there about unification across channels. Like, a unified strategy is so important, more than ever, across PPC and SEO. So at SOZO, we have like our dedicated SEO and AI search team, and then we've got like a paid media team. And that kind of collaboration across the two, even just to be like, hey guys, what are you guys doing this month with the PPC? How does this impact SEO? How can we, use the data and combine it to kind of determine what the opportunities are both sides? That is really important to make sure, so that SEO and PPC actually work together for a brand rather than being operated in silo. You mentioned, Sean, about resurgent interest in SEO, and I've definitely felt that over the past year. I think it's been helped with brands being really interested about the surge in AI search, brands wanting to know what their visibility looks like outside of Google and outside of traditional SEO. So that's, I think, really brought a lot of interest back around to SEO and made it beyond just traditional SEO on Google. But I think, I think it was earlier back in May last year, Search Engine Land released a report. I think it was a 13 to 15% year-on-year increase in cost per clicks. And most years we get a similar report like that, rising cost per clicks, Google trying to, make more of improve their own profitability and hit their own targets. So I think every year we've got brands that are faced with rising cost per clicks that makes it harder to see the same level of return that they saw previous year, having to get their sort of agencies or their specialists to work harder, having to get their website to work better for them to kind of continue to make PPC justifiable. I think the real power in SEO is that if done correctly, and the opportunity there is, you're not paying for every click. Whatever additional click, whatever brand awareness you drive to your website, whether it's through AI overviews, whether it's for people visiting your website, you're not paying for every one of those clicks. We worked with a brand last quarter on increasing their informational content for popular keyword phrases where they could absolutely speak into that subject matter, but they were outside of top 50 because they didn't have a relevant piece of content. And we worked with them closely on the content. And within a matter of weeks, they shot up to AI overviews and shot up to the top of organics. And they started getting like lots of clicks. And this is for evergreen content that they'll now get all of these kind of clicks like for free as a result of being like top of organic, top of AI overviews over the next 12 months. And they're not having to pay a shred of that. And that really shows the power of SEO. If it's strategic and if you tap into your niche areas, you tap into your expertise, you make sure that what you're putting out there is good, like exceptional quality and really speaks to your target audience and their intent, that can really build you like a healthy foundation whereby PPC is supplementing that, but you're not then being heavily dependent on PPC. So I had a lot of like exciting conversations with brands over the last year that want to still like leverage PPC, but really strengthen that core SEO foundation.
Yeah, cool. And I think one thing that definitely had a foundation for it all is for paid, for SEO, for AI bot crawlability is the actual UX of the website, like the design and the functionality of the website. Like that is like the key. If people can't if they go on there and then like it's a long process to do whatever they're trying to do, the search isn't any good, so they can't find other stuff they're interested in, or that your navigation is terrible, or like AI bots, can't navigate through the site, especially your e-commerce, and they can't navigate and do the checkout process or in any sort of like ease, then any money you pump into paid, or you pay for an agency for SEO or whatever, social, it's going to be a waste of money sending them to any website that doesn't really work. So I think SEOs and paid and everyone should be working very closely on, if we weren't before, like I keep saying, definitely now, because we know like that's so important. That clicks are going to be so hard to come by, so we got to make them count. And like you say, costs are going up with paid. We got to make them count. And we know like these AI bots have not got much patience, even less patience than humans. So they want an easy job. They want to find the information quickly. We got to make sure they can do that. So yeah.
And it's brought back round the importance of technical SEO for me, like making sure that behind the scenes structured data, the way that your content is built, the key contextual signals, it's even made metadata more important than what metadata has always been important for SEO, but now like with AI search, the way that AI bots crawl is a lot more surface level. It was mentioned at Brighton SEO that AI search bots are typically lazy. they'll often try and get clues from a page based on the URL slug or the metadata and make assumptions around that. So actually now technical SEO it's always been important, but I would say going into this year for brands, it's more important than ever to really nail that, because particularly in AI search, even if you've got great content, if you've got issues around your technical SEO, or if you're neglecting things like your URL slugs and your metadata, that could harm your visibility in AI search if there's a scenario where it doesn't go much more surface level beyond that to get to the real core of your content.
Yeah, and like the standard things, like if it takes long to load, just like humans, it's going to bounce straight off. It'll just go, well, it's something you can crawl hundreds of websites in minutes. Like it doesn't need your information. They'll go and find something else that's similar. And pop-ups, when I've done work with AI agents, they see these pop-ups and stuff. I have to get rid of them and deal with them just like humans would. It's annoying for humans, obviously, as well. So you're going to have pop-ups and stuff.
Yeah.
Make them count and make them relevant,
Yeah, well, I put AI to the test various times. So if I put like a URL of an article into ChatGPT and I could say, can you suggest some recommended metadata with commercial intent for this particular page? And it'll come back with that. And I'm like, oh, you didn't mention this particular piece from my content. Did you actually crawl the content? And sometimes like ChatGPT has double backed and gone, oh no, sorry, I didn't actually crawl it. And then it would then have a second look over. So I think sometimes, ChatGPT and the like still hallucinates. We may be led to believe that actually it's deep crawled your content and it's understood the full context of the piece. And actually in reality, sometimes it's just looking surface level at the URL and the metadata, and that's it. So for brands and for SEO specialists, within our industry, we need to be acutely aware of that and take those kind of things a lot more seriously going into this year.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very, like, if you haven't already, like, go and look at the different resources that, they've all kind of released. I know Microsoft and OpenAI and Google have all released sort of like things about how they operate and, and their best practices and stuff. So it's worth checking them out and reading through those. And the last one, in terms of like tools and stuff, are you shifting the tools you use? I mean, we did kind of cover this in the real talk, but, there's a lot of conversations around tools at the moment. There's the legacy ones that are kind of building a lot of stuff on top of their current infrastructure. There's new ones on the market, AI driven, like Profound, and there's like smaller ones that are doing really well, like SEO Stack. And then there's also people building loads of custom tools that are helping them do all sorts of different jobs in our industry. So yeah, how's it looking on your side, and what's interesting you, and who's disappointing you?
So yeah, I mentioned in the last call that we at SOZO have had a big review of our tech stack over the last 4 to 6 months, and not just for the obvious on like looking at our costs, but just actually looking at it and going, what are we actually using? Like, what are we actually using on a daily, regular basis, and what is driving value? And I think we and other agencies or specialists are guilty, and it's a trap you can fall into on any given week or quarter, where you've got a bunch of tools at your disposal and you're not necessarily using all of them. So we're actually trying to use less this year, but really double down into the ones that we are using and getting the most value on. Like Screaming Frog, like we use Screaming Frog a lot at SOZO and within our SEO and AI search team. But I still think there's so much capability within Screaming Frog. Like I'm always like challenging myself and our team, like, really get under the hood of that tool. We've been a SEMrush customer for 5+ years, but with the acquisition from Adobe, the fact that they're pushing on more enterprise, which is not us and it's not the brands that we work with, we've sort of been actively exploring a move away from that. And we've been proactively using, we're about sort of 6 months into using Writesonic, which again, last year did like loads of research around like AI search measurement. How can we get some really decent insight from AI search, not just positioning and visibility, but like brand sentiment, like which brands are winning in AI search and why, like getting some actual tangible actions from the data. So we've been working with Writesonic for the past 6 months, and that's a exceptional tool just for really getting a picture of a brand's positioning in AI search. But we're sort of looking to really double down on what we're using. I think the whole thing around paid tools, you can have lots of really good tools and still be a bad SEO specialist and churn out bad results. Like, I don't think these tools are gonna. I think that strategic direction, knowing what levers you need to pull, knowing where your best time is spent, and that discernment as a specialist, I think that is real key to success. I don't think having lots of fancy tools is necessarily going to guarantee results for yourself or the brands that you work with. There's lots of really useful tools. I mean, Search Console, with all of its features and additions over the past year or two, there's a lot to leverage with Search Console. So I think paid subscription tools still have their place within our industry. I think it provides valuable insight that can be surfaced. But I think crucially for success, it comes down to like, what are you doing with that data? How are you collaborating with your clients on that data? And how are you using your expertise to determine like what you actually move next and what's going to sort of impact the bigger picture?
Yeah. And similar to you, like when Mark Williams Cook was on, he was making a point about, who are these tools actually for? Are they for you? Are they actually helping you develop strategies, find opportunities, find weaknesses, stuff? Or are they just for you proving your worth to other people? If that is the case, do you really need them, in your tech stack? Because, okay, you do need to show certain reports to people, but at the end of the day, really you need like tools that offer you some of that, but generally they are giving you something back in your job and you're using them, you're utilizing them, like you say, because otherwise it's just like, most of us know, so if you work in industry enough and if you're half decent at the job, you kind of know what you should be doing anyway. These things are just like making sure that you are finding everything and you can do a good enough research to build out a good enough strategy. But like you say, with like advanced web ranking, and I think you use that as well, but there's so much they keep building things onto. I feel like I could be there all day sort of exploring their new features, and it just, you have to really dedicate time out to actually explore the tools you're using to fully utilize them. And like you say, or they could just be wasted. And
every brand that we work with comes to us with objectives, an idea of what success looks like to them. I mean, if they don't, then we'll support them on that and go, right, we need to build a picture of what success looks like. Every brand has friction points. A lot of the brands we work with are ambitious. They've got growth targets. There's somewhere they want to get to. So I think in whatever tools you use, however many tools you use, you have to determine, like, do these tools get me to where I need to be to achieve that for the brands that I'm working with? I think there is a risk of just having too many tools and just being very average at all of them.
Yeah. 100%. I probably I get attracted to shiny new objects, and I love playing around with tools and stuff. And we have got a big tech stack, and it is a problem. But yeah, like you say, it's good to review them, if not for like how you use them, but actually just for costs, because you're probably paying for things that you shouldn't be paying for.
And it just over the last a couple of weeks ago, I shared on LinkedIn how I was blending data between Search Console and Google Ads within Looker Studio and showing like Search Console and Google Ads right alongside, and how that can inform both PPC and SEO strategy. And that's using completely free tools. If a brand's already got Google Ads running and they've already got Search Console, and then Looker Studio is free as well, like that provides some like really valuable data for brands without using any paid subscription tools. So I think, as I said, paid subscription tools have their place, but I think the key is then getting that data that you need and what you do next. For me, I'm a big fan of an agile framework within search. So I if a brand or a client says to me, can I have a big 30-page SEO audit? For me, I'm very much like, let's see if we can spot like the 3 to 5 biggest impacts or blockers on your website or in your rankings that are holding you back. Let's get them ironed out ASAP. And then let's talk about the next ones down. Otherwise, you spend weeks doing this big fat report. And when you could actually just be cracking on with like the biggest impacts and actioning positive change.
Yeah, 100%. And someone who hopefully I'll have on soon, Kevin Indig, said about, tools, the ones that are going to succeed in the next year or so will be the ones that actually have those actionable insights to actually, take on and do something with. So yeah, and like GA4, it's had its, and I've bashed it a few times, but it has got its critics. But actually, I think if you use it correctly, that has some fascinating insights and tools that you can use within that to find out things as well.
Yeah. And I think what you said there from Kevin is spot on. Yeah, I think SEO tools especially need to catch up this year. That there's a lot of tools that are offering like AI-driven insights within the interface. Yeah, you can obviously like export data from the likes of SEMrush, bring it into ChatGPT, to get some insights, supporting commentary. But, there's inefficiencies even with that. So, SEO and search specialists should be looking to tools that are, really building upon a lot of the AI frameworks that are now available, getting insights and commentary within the data, within that interface, save you having to keep jumping off to LLMs to, cross-reference that. So that's certainly what we're looking for going forward this year. We don't just want ranking data. We don't just want, you've got X amount of duplicate meta on the site, but we actually want clear insight. What has changed? What is a bigger blocker? What should we move to? Yeah, just to support that strategic direction.
Yeah, help with prioritization and stuff. Yeah, I think that's going to be key. And definitely, like you say, there's so many tools, they can't all win. So I think that's definitely going to be maybe some casualties this year, unfortunately for them. But yeah, I'll let you go. I've held you. I said I would, but I really appreciate it, Christian. It's always good to chat and get your insights into things.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks for having me on, Sean. We've covered a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, we'll chat soon.